Okay, this will be my affirmative. I affirm the resolution resolved the United States ought to adopt a wealth tax. I will define the following terms for clarification during the round. The United States consists of all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and all territories. Ought is used to indicate duty or correctness, and a wealth tax is defined as a tax on personal property and financial assets above a particular level. Observation: the affirmation does not have to specify how much a wealth tax has to be, but rather just argue that the implementation of a wealth tax would be beneficial. My value is deontology as outlined by Kant. Deontology emphasizes duty, obligation, and adherence to rules and principles in making ethical decisions, and places a strong importance on the intentions behind actions rather than solely the outcomes. It also highlights the distinction between duty and personal desires. Kant argues that individuals have an obligation to act in accordance with certain rules in order to fulfill their duty and assure a fair and just society, even if it goes against their own desires. My value criterion will be the first and second formulations as listed by Kant. The first is the formula of universal law. This means that what you consider doing must be something that you can will or accept that all do. It is replacing individual preferences with purely universal terms. Secondly, Kant proposes the formula of humanity, where one must in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only. This shows that a person should be treated as valuables in themselves. Contention 1. The formula of universal law. In the status quo, the wealthiest do not contribute as nearly as much as they ought to compared to other economic classes. An analysis from economists Saez and Zucman from the University of California, Berkeley, found that the families in the top 0.1% are projected to owe 3.2% of their wealth in all taxes this year, while the bottom 99% are projected to only owe 7.2%. Judged in wealth, our current tax system asks the rich to pay a lot less than everyone else. This disparity in tax obligations highlights the necessity of a wealth tax under Kant because the wealthy are evading taxes and have not been paying their fair share. To put it in a different perspective, let's consider two people: a teacher with little savings in the bank and a tech tycoon with $200 billion in business equity, real estate, and fine art. If the teacher takes $62,000 in labor income and the tycoon takes $81,000, the former being the national average income for teachers and the latter being Jeff Bezos' base salary, they pay the same federal income tax as they are in the same tax bracket. That isn't fair, and merely increasing the income tax wouldn't correct this imbalance. Moreover, Bezos between 2014 and 2018, his wealth grew $99 billion and his reported income was $4.22 billion. Even though he made a vast profit, he only paid $973 million in taxes, or a true tax rate of 0.98%. If a wealthy individual can accumulate immense wealth without contributing to the society that enables them to become successful, it creates an unjust system. With a wealth tax, though, this inequality would be corrected and ensure that the wealthiest individuals complete their obligations under the formula of universal law. Contention 2. Formula of humanity. In his work Metaphysics of Morals, Kant states that the wealthy have acquired an obligation to the commonwealth since they owe their existence to an act of submitting to its protection and care which they need in order to live. Indeed, wealth isn't just a personal achievement, but a plethora of societal factors, including infrastructure, education, and legal systems. The roads that our good travels on, the degrees that they get, the laws that protect our businesses. All of these are heavily funded by the government and benefit all citizens. Now let's narrow the scope on infrastructure projects on Cape Cod bridges. The bridges are the only connection to and from Cape Cod for vehicular travel, supporting 229,000 year-round residents, 8,600 businesses, and 5 million annual visitors. Cape Cod itself is home to an abundance of wealthy individuals with more than 300 taxpayers earning million-dollar-plus incomes. With a lack of maintenance over time, these bridges were wearing down until the community secured federal funding to fix the bridges. Though not all bridges are fortunate in getting the funding, as there is a limited supply. According to the AMPP, 30% of U.S. bridges are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete, with many having no plans and being fixed, and increasing the wealth tax will increase the amount of money that the government can contribute back to the public, fulfilling the formula of humanity. On a more practical level, the wealthy have no reason to avoid this obligation either, even though the negation may state that the wealthy individuals will act out of personal desire. However, this is not the case. In his book, the Cornell sociologist Crystal Ball Young writes that people almost never move when they are at the advanced career stage, a time where they are most likely to face a millionaire tax. Additionally, it would be impractical for the wealthy to move to another country because they would be paying more taxes than they're trying to avoid. In fact, the United States is ranked 31st out of 38 OECD countries in terms of tax to GDP ratio in 2022, meaning that they have more taxes and that the wealthy would make less profits. A wealth tax is implemented with the intentions of leveling the playing field and is for the previously stated reasons I affirm. All right, and then this will be my nay case. I negate the resolution. Resolve, the United States ought to adopt a wealth tax. Observation, the negation does not have to specify how much a wealth tax has to be, but rather argue that the implementation of a wealth tax would be detrimental. My value for today is security as defined by John Locke. Security is defined as governments preserving the rights to life, liberty, and property of its citizens. Using the theory of natural rights, Locke argues that the governments have obligations to their citizens and have only limited powers over them. Specifically, Locke asserts that individuals have a natural right to acquire and possess property. He argues that property is a fundamental aspect of one's liberty, and any unjust interference with property rights is a violation of individual freedom and thus security. The value criterion I propose is the Lockean social contract. The social contract will ensure the protection of rights, with the government created through the consent of the governed, though before individuals lived within authority that enforced laws and maintained order, individuals lived in a hypothetical state called the state of nature. This meant that citizens had complete freedom, however, there were no laws prohibiting, for example, murder. Therefore, citizens willingly entered into a social contract where they gave up some of their natural rights in exchange for the protections by the government. Contention 1. Property. Under Locke's social contract theory, individuals have a right to acquire, possess, and dispose of property as they see fit, within the bounds of the law and as long as it does not infringe on the other person's rights. Imposing a wealth tax that targets individuals based on their accumulated assets is an infringement on this right, as it limits people's control over the fruits of their labor. The Heritage Foundation puts this in perspective by stating that America is not an aristocracy. If wealth was dynastic, the Forbes and Bloomberg billionaire list would be filled with members of the Carnegie and Rockefeller families. Yet these names are absent from both lists because the great American fortunes of today are new money and not old. In fact, of the 10 richest Americans on the 2023 Forbes 400 list, 9 of them are self-made. Property is a natural right stemming from an individual's right to own themselves and the product of their labor. Taxing an individual's wealth harms the security of that person and breaks the social contract. Contention 2. Consequences of property right violations. A wealth tax can create significant incentives for the growth of the underground economy, resulting in many resorting to illegal activities, therefore disrupting the agreement between the government and its citizens. According to the International Monetary Fund, in the United States, analysis done by Frederick Schneider shows that as a marginal federal tax rate increases by 1% point, the underground economy grows by 1.4 percentage points. The underground economy leads to a multitude of problems, including worker exploitation and capital flight. The underground economy leads to increased worker exploitation where employees in the underground often lack legal protections, benefits, and leading to poor living standards. The Office of Attorney General found that employers who successfully push workers into the underground economy save between 16.7% and 48.1% of payroll and fringe benefit costs for their workers, substantially undercutting their law-abiding business competitors. This is violating the social contract because under a wealth tax, people undercut the liberties of others. Moreover, a wealth tax can cause capital flight where the wealthy would relocate themselves to avoid the tax. For example, Jeff Bezos lived in Washington state until they proposed a wealth tax, leading him to sell about $15.7 billion of Amazon stock and to move to Florida to avoid paying the tax. That would have cost him $1.44 billion a year. This could have negative implications for the U.S. economy, as capital flight can lead to a decrease in investment, job creation, and overall economic growth, undermining Locke's social contract, as it is undermining the security of the citizens. And thank you.